Good afternoon, good evening, viewers and listeners, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. We have had a late start this evening. The reason being is the minister was caught in traffic and some other matters, and she is joining us shortly. We are discussing tonight local government in Guyana, and we will be joined by the Minister of Local Government, her Honorable Miss Priya Manickchand. Um, Joining us for this discussion this evening are two esteemed scholars, Professor Narayan Prasad and Professor Maniram Budu. Neither one is a stranger to this program. Both have been to this program several times, multiple times before. I am Vishnu Bisram, and I am certain that many of you also are familiar with me. I am not certain if the minister is already with us, but before she joined us, or if she's joining us, I would like to ask each of these two gentlemen, who are outstanding scholars, if they could talk a little bit before the minister joins us about their academic background. Professor Narayan Prasad, you want to start first? Tell us where you're from and your academic background.
Yeah, well, I'm from Bath. Bath Estate. People know what they call Bath Settlement.
Mhm.
I have a PhD in social psychology with an interest in development. Now, the some may ask what's the connection there? Because for any kind of development to take place, you have to deal with the culture or the psyche of the population, which is the social psychology part of the thing. So that's my interest, and Guyana has always been my interest. I went back, taught at the University of Guyana from 76 through 78, and after running in conflict with the Barnum government, I had to flee. So that's, in essence, who I am.
And Dr. Maniram Budu?
Yeah, I'm from Windsor Forest, West Coast, Demerara. I actually graduated from UG. I was one of the first student graduated from UG in technology. Um, Later, university hired me, and I worked also in practice in Guyana. And then I got a PhD from Cambridge in civil engineering and geomechanics. I went back to Guyana during the Barnum years, and I taught at the University of Guyana, where I became a head of civil engineering department. And then I also work in practice there with David Klauke and Associates and on other consultants. Um, and then during that period, as I know Professor Prasad and yourself are aware of it, the contribution was very minimal to Guyana because we were lined up to get a pound of flour or something, or no flour, or a pint of oil, right? And so after I served my contract, I left Guyana. I worked at McMaster University, professor there, and then State University of New York at Buffalo, and then moved to. I was at Oxford for a while there, and uh, ETH in Switzerland, and then University of Australia and University of Arizona, where I spent a number of years there. So that is who I am. Okay, so the minister is here.
The minister is here. So, Minister, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, good night, and
Minister,
I'm very sorry to be late. Guyana is currently hosting Guy Expo, which is a big building expo, and that just started. Prime Minister Holness from Jamaica is here on a state visit. It's a big period for us. A lot going on
right.
Essequibo that caused a lot of damage. His Excellency team over there is just a little busy, but I couldn't miss your 10th anniversary show because this has been such an informative forum for persons here in Guyana, but also in the diaspora. And it has been an intellectual forum where we have, you just heard from the two gentlemen who are helping to do the interview tonight. It's not just been a chat and a gaff. I found this show to be very analytical with statistics So thanks for having me.
Well, Minister, I know you don't need any introduction because you've been in this show multiple times, and while you are as local government minister, as well as before that, when you're Minister of Education, and you have had a very long and illustrious career in Parliament, as well as serving as the Minister of Education. So, first, before we talk about local government, you want to tell us anything about the current expo, and then if you could talk a little about if we were affected at all, and how much so by this this earthquakes that hit Venezuela.
Right. So, you know, when the PPP came to office in 1992, there was no housing ministry. The ministry was closed, which means, and squatting was rampant. I mean, we still have squatting, but it was rampant. It was the only option people had to get in their own homes, to live under some kind of shelter. And uh, that was not, it was a very deliberate, conscious effort to establish a Ministry of Housing with a view to making sure that all our people could one day live in dignity. So you came from that settlement, you came from where you're accustomed to, and I'm from Myconi originally, where you're accustomed to um, many homes living in the same, many family units living in the same home, so that we could, you know, function. So there would be a mother and a father, and then there would be um, three children married to three other persons and their families growing up in the same home or the same yard. That is no longer where we are. In the last 5 years alone, we've distributed more than 50,000 house lots or housing units. So the Building Expo was, it actually started when His Excellency President Ali was Minister of Housing. And it was to bring together all the players in the market, not just the persons, the government who's building houses or distributing lots, but the person who's selling cement, the person who is making furniture, the people who are doing windows, the people who are doing drainage. Just bring get together everybody in the same space so that the nation could see um, what was available. People, ordinary people, but so that also investors could see what are opportunities in the landscape of Guyana. It's been very successful. It stopped when we came out of government. It has begun again. So it's a very useful expo, and it's usually very beautifully done, very, very well attended. There's usually a holdover that has to happen because there's so many people who want to go that didn't manage to go in the time that was allotted.
Well, I went a couple of years, so I can attest to that. I mean, I regret I missed it this year because I look forward to attending it, but this year I can't. And anything about the earthquakes? Because every guy.
So the earthquakes didn't directly affect us, and it didn't affect us at all in terms of an earthquake. But we had a very bad storm slash squall yesterday, where there was quite a bit of damage on the Essequibo coast. More than 120 homes and or businesses, both in private sector and public sector buildings, were destroyed. A lot of people were displaced, but President Ali was there with a very senior team within an hour of that. Aware that most of those persons who had their roofs ripped off and so on have been given cover, and there has been a commitment to assisting with getting people back on their feet with their losses.
Okay, great. And you're now Minister of Local Government and Education, as well as housing, are closely integrated with local government as well. So you want to give us an update of what's happening, with your plan for local government for the rest of this year.
Yeah. So local government is actually, as it suggests, governance at the local level. So everything that a government would have to do, education, health, housing, agriculture, infrastructure, at a local level. So we have in Guyana 70 neighborhood democratic councils. That would be the first tier of governance here at the bottom, where the neighborhoods, defined, of course, by boundaries, by law, get to elect who their representatives are. So we have a chairman, a vice chairman, and X number of councillors, depending on the size of the neighborhood. And then we have 10 regional councils. Those are um, the body that manages the region. So that's the second tier. In some, we also have 10 municipalities. So, it's Georgetown City Council, there is Linden, there's Madia, Rose Hall, Corriverton, New Amsterdam. So we have towns, 10 towns. So those are the local government bodies. And of course, then you have central government, which is, I'm the minister of local government. So that's the central government at the cabinet level. The intention when we passed that law in the 80s was to decentralize services and also have people benefit from a devolution of power and resources. I'm not sure that we quite achieved that because we're coming from an economy where we were a heavily indebted poor country. And then we moved into, after many years, a middle income country. And now we're one of the fastest growing economies. But we have habits that prevail from the time that we could not properly decentralize and evolve. And so those are some of the things we have to look at now.
And in terms of decentralization, I know the government has had multiple outreaches in their various areas, various regions, and I believe next week there will be an outreach in Essequibo, Anna Regina, I believe it is. You want to talk a little about that?
Well, no, not Anna Regina and Essequibo. So the decentralization is far bigger than outreach. Way, way bigger. It's very different too. So the outreach is, so let's talk about that. The outreach is President Dali taking government to people. At the end of June, we had one in Bartica. That's where the entire cabinet, all the members of parliament, advisors and everything would go into a region, would spread out across the region in all the communities and have various community meetings, public meetings, where people come to interact with the various leaders, but also to tell us what might be some of the problems that they've been encountering that affect them adversely, where people get to make suggestions. It's not always about complaints. Sometimes it's about people making suggestions about how we could better govern or how we could put a service in place or what are things they think we can do. So it's really us living Article 13. So Article 13 in our Constitution mandates a consultative process between government and people. And so this has been the cabinet the Irfan Ali administration, whether the first term or this one, that has done, I think, the most outreaches ever, with a view to making sure we connect with people and that we hear from them and they hear from a lot is resolved and a lot of other policies are developed. In the evenings of those meetings, we also have intense policy discussions on various issues. It might be how to respond better to a crisis, and then you hear from everyone, a policy paper is developed based on that, or it might be a presentation on the ills of social media on young children, or how to use AI response. We are examined as a collective leadership body, and then we implement later on.
Okay, so we'll just take a brief break.
So that's the outreach. Decentralization means something else. It means education. So let's take education or health. You have a policy that is developed by the ministry. So the Ministry of Education says when children should write exams, what age they should go to school, what the curriculum should be, which examination body we're going to subscribe to so that our children will be accredited by X body or Y body. The regions are supposed to be, it's not happening as yet, but the regions are supposed to be responsible for the everyday maintenance and running of the school, hiring of the staff, paying of the staff. But in many cases, recommendations not in many cases, where it is necessary, recommendations for discipline. So it's supposed to be not the central ministry running all the schools, but that they're main policies are made at the central ministry, and then it's run by the schools. So you're all in the US. You have the federal government running, making wide policy, and then states having their own education systems and bars and so on. Something like that. Not quite like that, but something like that. That
Okay.
would be the decentralization I think was envisioned by the legislation.
Well, great. Thanks for that introduction. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll be Professors Budu and Narayan Prasad will have some questions and comments.
Of course.
Okay, so Professor Narayan Prasad, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on two things that you mentioned. One is decentralization. About 2 or 3 years ago, I wrote an article, a lengthy article, on decentralization in Guyana, the essentials of decentralization. And in that article, if you go back and you can look at it, it specifically states that given the population disparities within the regions, that decentralization must be accompanied by some quasi type of centralization, because for example, if you have a court system that is unreachable, if you have an educational system that is unreachable, and I have seen this, and I have heard about it too, that yes, it is nice to say that local districts have decision-making authority, but where do they go from there? And I made the suggestion that you create little satellite cities. Like if you apply for a passport, you don't have to go to Amsterdam or Georgetown alone. That you can do that within the boundaries of certain regions. And I still believe that decentralization need to follow a pattern, not only talk about it and say we are decentralizing. What are you decentralizing? And what, by saying yes to give decision making to the local people, that's not decentralization. Because from my perspective, that is talking at the people and not talking with the people. Because you still have local leaders who are there, who control the districts, and they usurp the power of decentralization. But if you have one type of satellite that people can appeal to, like you have a city hall where all functions are going, for lack of a better term, I use the word city hall, and I think I did so in that article. So that's one. The second thing I want to mention, and I'm just throwing this out for discussion because I don't have the answers. The second thing I'd like to mention, you talk about homes and settlements. And I would like to hear Dr. Budu's view on this, because this is my view. You can plan schemes and multiple schemes all over Guyana. But if it is done haphazardly, then the cluster of homes become a problem. Bath is getting that way, because I have looked at many videos, many forums, and talked to many people at Bath, where streets are so narrow, two cars can hardly pass by. And today, as I was told over and over, a household is not satisfied with having one vehicle. They want to have multiple vehicles. But as you plan cities, when you plan communities, you have to be well, it has to be well thought out, because drainage can be a problem. Dr. Budu knows that very well. Also, transportation within communities to the other areas in connection with the other areas. So I would like to hear the views on that. Yes, the distribution of house lots and these things are very important, but they must be accompanied with some type of satisfactory planning that can accommodate for future problems that can result from too dense clusters.
Okay.
So perhaps I didn't articulate it well, but it wasn't just the giving out of house lots. This is an entire, where we develop communities or housing schemes, it's an entire scheme developed. It's planned out and drawn by urban planners or planners, people with the appropriate qualifications, where green spaces are identified, house lots are surveyed and marked off, streets and drainage are planned into that housing area, schools, areas left for primary as well as nursery schools, and if necessary, secondary schools, places for religious worship. So it's a community that's built out. But what you were talking about with Bath, because at Bath Settlement, that was a community that was already established. I'd invite you to look at something like Silica City that is being built right now, where it's going to be a completely green community, or the Windsor Estates community, where the entire community was planned out exactly as you are suggesting, or the Providence community, or the Lenora community, where it's not just the handing out of house lots. It's a very layered approach to making sure people can live in communities, not just houses. So yeah, have you come down recently? You
No,
haven't come down recently, yes.
no.
So maybe we need to bring you down for a visit. But settlement has been in existence for a really long time. So what you see is a build out of what was, and that's always a little problematic because you don't get to start the way you want to start a community. But if you look at communities that started in the new communities, you would see that kind of urban planning happening.
Yeah, Minister.
Well, you know,
Yeah, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
England had planned garden cities after many disasters. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that pop in my mind constantly is that sometimes we forget to have recreational areas, because you can have one large recreational area, but thinking that will be the nucleus of the community, when in fact you can have two smaller areas that where it is reachable to the people, and also it is inviting for interaction and clusters and
Yeah.
relationships, because that is important in planning too, the
So that's
relationships that people share.
us of it's not giving house lots, it's building neighborhoods and communities, understanding that stronger families and stronger communities will give us a stronger country and more resources that can help build out Guyana. So that's, it's very conscious building. It's
Yeah,
not, we can't do
and that's
much
good to hear.
communities that exist already. So Georgetown, let's take Newtown Kitty. That's a community that exists. We can fix the drainage, we can clean the alleyways and now concrete, make them concrete so that their water is flowing, but you can't do much with how it was already planned. Where we are building new communities, all that you speak of is being considered, and it's really beautiful to see. So I say you gotta come down, you gotta come down and see what's happening.
Yeah. Minister,
Yes, yes.
I'm quite impressed with Windsor Estate. But I'm just kind of curious. I mean, it's well layout and so forth. Is that private or is that government?
That's a private establishment, but the government is in the process right now of looking to see how we can make in a rapidly in a quick by doing it very fast and efficiently, model communities in 21 areas in various regions. You'll see that being rolled out shortly. And the model community will have what we're talking about here: concrete drains, properly marked roads, street lights, green areas, or play parks, um, public buildings that are accessible and that work. Just what a model community would look like. There would be difficulties because with something like a private estate, you can, or a private property, you can charge homeowners fees and homeowners maintenance fees and so on. When you're talking about public already established public housing schemes where people did not know those were requirements, we might not be able to implement some of the same fee structures, but all of the facilities can be there. And so you're going to see a rollout of that very, very shortly. There's a group now of ministries: the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Public Works, the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Agriculture for the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority, trying to get to, not trying, we got together last Friday actually, or last Monday, got together and we've assigned engineers and planners to the 21 communities so that we could know exactly what's required in that for that scope to be fulfilled.
Professor Moniram Buru from Windsor Forest. I know Windsor Forest is a very
From
old.
Windsor Forest,
Yes.
Windsor Forest has a very deep history for Chinese.
Yeah.
Well, all races, I think.
Or Chinese came there actually.
Initially,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Professor Buru.
Yes. Minister, good to see you again on this program. Our discussion today centers on a very powerful and timely idea: taking government to the people.
Mhm.
In Guyana, you have these regional democratic council and neighborhood democratic councils. These are where those promises, taking the government to the people, is either fulfilled or fall short. These bodies are closest to the people,
Yep.
yet they often face persistent challenges: limited capacity, uneven service delivery, government concerns, and gaps in citizen engagement. So today, I will move beyond generality and ask some critical questions.
Mhm.
Our viewers and I look forward to hearing not about the progress, but also about the hard truths, the bottlenecks, and the concrete steps being taken to fix them. Because what the RDC and NDC do is felt in daily lives of the citizen because they're the closest, right? So what I want to know, I know from previous interviews with you, you're very straightforward, and you speak the truth. So your party slogan is taking government to the people. What does that really mean for Guyana today, beyond the outreach visits and consultation?
Well, I don't know that that's a party slogan. The party slogan is Service and People's Progressive Party. So there are challenges. You have more than 1,000 counselors.
Hmm.
Wherever you have a large collection of people,
Hmm.
you will have some who are excellent. You'll have some who are not sure what they have to do. You'll have some who have personal issues and problems that disallow them from serving and functioning the way we would expect them to. And you'll have some delinquents. And so you see that in that collection of persons. These are elected officials. So you can't just go changing them out. You have to wait on an election to do that. But I will say this: it's easy to say what was wrong or what is wrong. Like you spoke of resources. Hitherto, the NDCs would have to depend on their income from rates and taxes or any kind of income they earned from services they delivered, like surveys and so on, to build a bridge or a footpath or put up street lights. They don't have to do that anymore. Each NDC $30 million. That's 150,000 US dollars without as a grant every year. The government has given and has committed to give. We haven't given all as yet because they haven't arrived in the countries yet. Garbage compactor trucks to every NDC. tractors and trailers to every NDC, a fire truck to every NDC. This is over the last 2 to 3 years. So I'm not saying, so these are some of the ways we can make sure capacity, because you spoke of their capacity, um, is no longer a challenge. Yesterday, I announced that we're moving the stipend or wage salary increase from for counselors on the NDC from $4,000 to $30,000 per month. We're moving the vice chairs from $5,000 to $40,000, and we're moving the chair people from $10,000 to $50,000. So it's really trying to give the wherewithal to those bodies so that they can do what we expect them to do, which is to serve. Having come into the ministry, I understand a little bit better that it's not only about the garbage truck and the fire truck and the salary. A lot of times, these counselors and officials just don't know what next to do. So we have to do some, and that's I believe our responsibility at the ministry. Some very easy mapped out. This is what happens when this happens. So someone is not weeding their plot of land. This is the step that can be taken by the NDC. You serve notice, you get a court order, you go in and weed it, you send the bill to them. A lot of people, officials, do not know what the process is. Or somebody's building their home outside of the regulations, or their building or their shop or whatever, and they know that this is wrong. They've served the notice, but they're not sure what to do after. So there has to be a lot of training and retraining. These are bodies that change and can change every 2 to 3 years, because that's when they have elections. So there has to be some written up SOPs and protocols that can prevail over time. That I wouldn't say they're without challenge. In fact, if you listen to the man in the street, the common comment on their various posts and so on, you'll see that some people believe their NDCs are not functioning the way they would like to see them function. They're not responsive. They're not. But sometimes, like I said, might not be that they're not responding, but that they haven't communicated the process. And some of these responses have legal processes that take a little bit longer. So uh, while there are challenges, I think a lot has been done or is being done to try to reduce the amount of challenges NDCs should have. I know for sure solid waste disposal was a big issue for residents. How is my garbage being removed? How is it being disposed of? You can imagine that if someone has garbage that is not disposed of, that becomes a nuisance to the person, their family, their pets. That's being addressed by, like I said, government giving to the NDC not only the garbage trucks, but the money to run them and maintain them. Uh, so those are valid questions. It's not gone beyond us. But like I said, these are elected officials. We can't just walk into an NDC and say you're not functioning, so all of you should go home. And we can replace you with people who will. There's an election process that allows them to get in there.
So, what would you say then, from what you've told me? What do you say would be the top three challenges that you face as a minister, right, to get this thing working well?
Yeah, I think that one of the most that I have seen that you wouldn't see. So if you ask the resident, they might give you a very different answer from what I'm about to give you. If you ask the resident what is her top or his top three challenges, they may say garbage disposal, drainage, streetlights. That might be what they say. If you ask me from this level, what are the top three challenges that get in the way of the NDC delivering on those issues? It would be their know-how. Like they simply do not know, in some cases, what to do after if a neighbor, you have two neighbors, one has a mango tree that is leaning into the other one's yard. And it sounds like a small issue, but that's everything to that person because all the mangoes are falling on the floor. They can't enjoy their backyard. It's messed up. That's that kind of complaints that come up. That's a very simple issue. The law is very clear on that. And it's the common law and our law that's clear. If something comes into your yard, you're allowed to cut it down. You're allowed to remove it. but NDCs may not actually be aware that that is an instruction or an advice that they can offer. So they kind of fumble with, well, we're going to talk to the person who is offending. We served them notice. We spoke to them again. Whereas there's a very simple solution. You could take your cutlass and cut it down. The part that is offending in your yard. But have we taken the effort to write some of that up, to get that information out, to
Right.
let people know some of those things? So I think number one um, thing that we can do that would make it better is to get everybody talking to everybody. So, since I came into office, I've met 6 to 5 of the 7 NDCs. And within the next couple of weeks, I'll finish the other 5. And that's all in trying to let them understand that we are one body, really, in different villages, trying to run the country in a way that is most pleasant for the people that we swore to serve.
So look at one of your solutions you mentioned is education, especially for the RDC officials, and to make sure that the rules and that governs these local areas are written clearly and simply for people to understand. And I want to know whether you plan also to use digital tools, right, to let people be aware of this, because everybody got a cell phone, you
Yeah.
see, and all this information should be written in a way, and probably and engage AI with it too. They can search
Aware
this
of this because
information
everybody got a cell
and
phone.
find
See,
questions,
and all.
ask questions, and get the answers.
So I'm glad you asked. We're about to launch, probably in the coming week, a website. The ministry actually doesn't have a website where people could access information. We just built an app that's been in use for about 2 months, where you can make whatever complaint you have to make. So if it's that your garbage has not been picked up, there's a pothole that's been developed in front of your house, there is noise nuisance, whatever it is, that you could go onto this site, you make the complaint, and right away AI begins to, we have an AI feature, it begins to answer you. We run that down with other ministries. A pothole wouldn't be fixable by the Ministry of Local Government. It's fixable by the Ministry of Public Works, but that we would run that down for the resident. So we are using tools that are available to us. Some of the, I spoke to all the NDCs last night. That finished about 9 o'clock of Region 3. And one of the guys, one of the chairpersons, I said, you'll need to put a notice, because he was moving the NDC needs to move for a little bit so that they could do some repairs. And I said, you need to put that on your Facebook page. He said, I don't have a Facebook page. So we're also dealing with large numbers of persons, and we have to bring them on board. I don't see it as an easy exercise, but I don't see it as insurmountable, because I don't work by wringing my hands. I try to make sure we figure out what is it that we need to do, and then head into doing it. That's that's how I've always been working. So I don't think some of these things are insurmountable. I think there's a lot of people involved, and we'd have to bring a lot of people along the journey. And when you have a lot of people involved in implementation, you get all sorts of variables that sometimes you can't control. But you can guide through, like I said, the right SOPs, the right protocols, and so everybody knows where we're going on these particular issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Which is
Yeah.
essentially what you said. We have to write these things up. So
Right.
that's we're in the process of doing some of that.
Yeah, if I may intervene for a moment, I think one of the major challenges I observed all over the country is the widespread use of illicit drugs. And I know this doesn't fall under your ministerial portfolio, but home affairs, social security, education, and so forth. Is anything being done to address this? I mean, everywhere young people are smoking weed. Some are even graduated on to more dangerous drugs.
So you have a worldwide issue of these are not localized issues. Um, Teenage pregnancy, early sexual activity, STIs, the usage of prohibited items. These are all worldwide issues that countries grapple with, in especially in their young people. And of course, the larger the country, the bigger the problem. So if you live in the U.S., the problem of people, for example, every 3 seconds in the United States, a woman is abused by her domestic partner. We don't have the same stats here. Today, the new stat in the US is it used to be 1 in 4, 1 in every 4 women experience domestic violence in some way, stalking, isolation, actual physical blows, a whole host of things. Now it's 1 in 2, 1 in every 2 women. The bigger the country, the bigger the problem. I would I know you said just now you see widespread illicit use of drugs. I wouldn't call it widespread. I'd say we have problems, and I'd say we cannot bury our heads in the sand, but I don't have any evidence to suggest that it is widespread. For me, one teenager using weed or cocaine would be one too many, but I don't believe we have any evidence before us to sit on a program and declare that we have a widespread drug use problem amongst our young people, because it's the same young people that are in the same age bracket, the same age group, that are topping the Caribbean, that are finishing high school and primary school at rates that are comparably higher than our Caribbean counterparts. Do we have young people who do illegal things? Of course, we do. And it would be silly to say that we don't. But I don't believe we have any evidence, and you haven't given me any, that suggests that it is widespread, as you say. Um, I want to be very careful, because for me, if there's one young person whose education is disrupted because of an introduction to marijuana or cocaine or any other drug, it's one too many. But at the same time, we have to be responsible with these terms, because you find it
Okay.
in some report somewhere. And then it came from Vishnu Bisram, said that on a program with Priya Manickchand. And it ends up in a report, and it's not even true.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have to be careful with those.
Valid critique.
Yeah,
Yes. Um,
yeah. I like to you see that's my
field of expertise.
decentralization article
Mhm.
in
Might
2023.
not always. I just saw you this Kaicher news. I barely saw that because of the
Yes.
screen. That's not always reliable.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was my article I'm talking about in
Oh, I looked at that.
on
Yeah, I made a mental
decentralization.
note that I'm gonna look for that article.
It
When
was
we're
written in 2023, but
right. I'm gonna have a
here
look
is
at
what
it.
I want to get back with. I I am really happy to know that one, that there seems, from what you're saying, is that there is more of a concerted effort in terms of planning from a perspective of rapid
You know, the
development.
president got his PhD in urban planning, right? So
Yes,
he's
that's
Dr. Irfan Ali, Mohammed Irfan Ali, because he got a PhD in urban planning. Prior to that, he was actually the Minister of Housing when we had the largest expansion of housing communities. I want you to hear the word communities, not house lots shared out, of
yes,
housing communities in the country.
yeah.
That's where the Providence, Migrant Scheme, Parfait, you know, Tushen, where communities rose up around Guyana. And that is when we didn't have oil.
Well,
We were a middle
I have
income
a
country.
master's in urban planning. I have a
Yeah.
master,
So
but
you really should not only come down to visit, you should come down to live here and give us some of your stories.
here is the thing.
If I'm
Here's my
interrupt, it's now 8:06. I don't know how longer the
I
minute.
just want to make this one
Let's try to
comment
wrap up.
very quickly. In terms of, I don't expect the government to answer to address every problem there is in the country. Incrementally, when it's being done, to me, that's the approach that one
Yep.
should take, and not expect too much that the government has not resolved this or the government has not resolved that. Because in addressing a problem, social problems do not go away, they don't disappear. You have what they do is that they mutate and they transform themselves. So it's a constant way of addressing the problems. And so housing is a good example. Education is a good example. Also, the drug situation, as was mentioned, that's an example too, because you want to address these things. But one should not rely on the government as the solution to all of the social problems within the communities. Sometimes what you have to do is to educate the people how to take care and address their own problems, and also look for the kinds of transformation that is taking place and be able to address those as well. And so
Yeah.
but the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes you have to educate the community on with regards to the problems that they
Right.
are experiencing.
Yeah. And I'm glad you made that point. You know, sometime in, I think either January or late last year, the president had a visit to London. He was actually part of one of two heads of state that appeared in a film. And so he went up and had some other meet. He went up to that premiere, but he also had some other meetings. And I was with him. And we went to the King's Cross, if anybody knows that area in London. And that was a slum here prior to it becoming the King's Cross, where we have Google and Meta and banks and all that there now. And the planner was walking around with us, showing us what it was before and how many years it took. And I'm talking about years, 20 years or so, to bring it out of the what was essentially a slum feared area where people would be, their pockets would be picked and all of that, into a very desirable space that has a school, play area, transportation, restaurants, like I said, big businesses like Google and Meta and so on. And that took a long time. And I agree with you, things can't happen overnight. But I'm also very conscious that people expect of us rapid service. And I think we have a duty to, while I'm very conscious that change in attitude takes a while and perhaps generations coming out of education and some other things that are not changed overnight, I do believe we have a duty to work really hard to try to transform very quickly, because our country has been in the doldrums for so long regarding, you know, what our resources were versus what our needs were. Now that we have resources, I feel a burden to make sure those resources transform people's lives very quickly, and that we bring people along this journey. So it's not only the bridges. You know, I just came from the expo and you could see this beautiful bridge in the background. It's not only the bridges and the glass buildings and the high rises and the widened roads, but people must come along this journey. Their lives must get better. They must feel dignity, must mean something to them. Their children must be able to access high school. So, you know, in 92, we had 30% of our children who were able to access a secondary education. By 2015, it was about 68% of our children able to access a secondary education. And within the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have 100% of our children being able to access secondary education. Between 2015, 2020 and 2025, we started and or finished 4 high schools. So, we've never built 44 high schools in a 5 year period ever in our country. Now, someone could argue that, oh, that's a lot of schools to build, considering your entire country for its entire history has had only 117 schools, and that you can take it a little bit slower, people would understand. I don't hold that view. I hold the view that we have to work day and night to try to rapidly change out country for the next generation. And even as we're changing out for the next generation, that we must bring this generation along. Big task, yes. Impossible task, no.
Yeah.
But
So
I'm
just
just an optimist.
just a comment on what you said on King's Cross. I was there several times, and
Mm,
on a tour I was told Guyanese timber was used in the original construction of King's Cross, and in the rehabilitation of King's Cross. I will have Professor Boudou with his final thought, and then the minister will close off.
Yeah, yeah, Minister, I'm glad you mentioned that we go beyond the bridges and the roads, and you're looking to bringing people along. You know, Guyana should learn the lessons is from other places have grown rapidly. When you grow rapidly economically, you get some social ills, and a lot of social ills that you see. For example, you and I talked before about the roads and the transportation and drivers, right? And if you look at some of the communities that you talked about, you have to develop communities, right? That people work and live there, right? So you reduce their transportation needs within that community, right? I have seen drainage in Guyana, right? Drainage to the same old drainage system was there in the estate period, right? And you call that drainage, that's not drainage. So there's a lot of ill things that's going on in Guyana at the moment that has to be solved. But you have to have plans, right? And what I haven't seen is these plans, right? I've asked several times to see these plans, how you plan. Because if you have roads, right, you must not look at roads itself, you must look at a transportation system. How are these roads linking up to move goods and services and people, right, very efficiently and cost effective, right? So you have to look at your ferry service. This road joins to that ferry service. This is how you move it, right? I haven't seen that plan, right? And I've asked various ministers here about that plan.
Yeah,
Right?
but you don't always see everything before it's rolled out, right? I can tell you now that the president has led discussions himself. I'm not sure if you know the King's Foundation is actually in Guyana. They're actually here now, so that's just prophetic. But they're working with the government of Guyana, and they're actually presently in Guyana right now, just by coincidence. Um, to transform Georgetown. The transformation of Georgetown includes the restoration of buildings that we have, how we can organize the city in a way so that transportation is orderly and that the usage of the roads are orderly, is orderly. How we can maintain our green spaces so that we don't give up that part of our heritage, how we can make walking tracks around the country, how we could preserve our art and our history. And that's very detailed work. Now, governments generally don't run to the public or a program like this or anywhere else and make announcements before those are finalized. Finalizing that takes some time. So they were here about 6 to 8 weeks ago. They're here again. This is King Charles's foundation.
Yeah.
Where so I hope you heard that. We're not looking to build out only the glass buildings and the high rises. We're looking to restore. You know, restoration is very different from construction. So I just got a report on the Stabroek market. For the next 5 years, the Stabroek market is going to be restored and extended, and the border market is going to be rebuilt completely. I can say that now. If you want to see a plan for that, you can't see it now because we're still in the process of getting the details of what restoration looks like when you're talking about something built 100 years ago. And then how do you accommodate the people who can no longer fit in this restored building by an extension that does not take away from the aesthetics of it? Those are very, if you're Professor Posada, who said he's a planner, would understand that that's not stuff that happens overnight, but the conversation and the action behind the scene is happening for some of those things.
And
So,
is the community involved with that? You have community comment?
absolutely. The King, well, outside of our own commitment to making sure people are on board, there are some foundations and funders that do not work unless the community's involvement is fully there and recorded. So in terms of, you know, if whatever it is we want to do with the Stabroek market, we'd have to take it to the Stabroek market vendors, users, stakeholders to say, and the city council to say, these are the problems. This is what we'd like to fix, and this is how we'd like to fix it. How do you feel about this? Then we take that input and then make a master plan.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
well, thank you for this exchange, and I do accept the minister's correction that yes, drug use is not pervasive and it's not widespread, but it is a challenge that needs to be addressed among some individuals in virtually every community that I visited, and people talked about it anyway. But Minister, I want to thank you very much. Any final word, please do.
No, again, I want to say congratulations. It's not easy to keep a program running, and I'm not talking about the finances. I'm talking about Professor Bodu and Professor Prasad. and you, Doctor, um, keeping an hour a week, putting aside an hour a week. And that sounds like a small thing, but a commitment to make sure you're there at that time. I want to thank your funders because I know there are benefactors behind this that make sure this program gets aired, that we can have these conversations. As you know, I don't agree with everything you say, and you don't agree with everything I say, but we must have these healthy exchanges because all of us have one thing in common. We want to see a better Guyana, a more developed Guyana, and particularly people who are brought along this journey. That's where we very people centered government, very people centered programs, and in everything you see us do, you see that coming out very very clearly. So. Just wanted to say congratulations. I am doing a program myself called Towards Article 29, which is trying to get to gender equality. And I know how hard it is to get one every single week. In fact, I did three, and we're now starting it back. And so, to all of you who give time to this program, thank you very much. It's very useful.
Yes, sir.
I will take the final word. Just before we started, Professor Budu, I'm quoting him, about 40 years, 50 years ago, when we traveled abroad or studying abroad, and we were ashamed to tell people we were from Guyana. And I could say over the last several years, we could proudly say we are Guyanese because we have really transformed the nation over the last couple of decades or so. So thank you for your contribution, the government's contribution, and so on and so forth, for helping to bring Guyana where it is today. And I'm afraid that's all the time we have. And so we'll close this program. Thank you for watching us, listening to us this evening. You are watching the Guyana Dialogue. Thank you. Good night.
Yes.
Good night. Good night, Minister.
Good night.
Yes, sir.